The first thing you need to know about Betrayal is that it sounds like nothing at all. No dramatic music, no thunderclap, just the quiet murmur of your wife's voice through thin walls at 2 in the morning, talking about you like you're a broken appliance she can't return. He's a burden now, Mom. I can't take care of him after his accident. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I froze in my wheelchair halfway between my home office and the bedroom. The hallway stretched before me like a gauntlet, Claire's voice drifting from her bedroom where she paced with her phone pressed to her ear. The McGinty boys said they'd help move his stuff tomorrow. We'll put him up at that motel on Route 9. It's got wheelchair access. Nothing like hearing your wife call you a project she can't return for store credit. 6 months ago, I was Jackson Reid, CEO of Reid Safety Gear, the guy who built a multi-million-dollar empire making harnesses and safety equipment for construction workers. The irony wasn't lost on me that I fell from one of my own safety rigs during a plant inspection, shattering 3 vertebrae and paralyzing me from the waist down. Clare barely visited during my 3-month hospital stay, always claiming work emergencies at her law firm. No, Mom, I'm not being cruel. You didn't see him struggling to get dressed this morning. It took him 40 minutes just to put on a shirt. And the wheelchair... God, the wheelchair takes up half the hallway. I gripped my wheels so hard my knuckles went white. 40 minutes? Try 20. And that was because I was learning to button shirts with hands that still cramped from nerve damage. But why let facts ruin a good sob story? Danny and Tommy will be here at 8. They'll pack his essentials and drive him over. I've already talked to the manager. The room's paid for a month. A month. My loving wife of 15 years had given me a month's notice like I was a tenant behind on rent. I wheeled backward into my office, heart hammering against my ribs. Through the window, Iron Lake stretched out under a canopy of stars, the same view I'd admired when we bought this house. Back then, Claire called it our forever home. Apparently, forever had an expiration date. The McGinty brothers, Danny and Tommy, were Claire's twin brothers, 2 guys who'd never met a problem they couldn't solve with their fists or a case of beer. They'd always resented me for stealing their sister from their blue-collar world and dragging her up to what they called fancy boy territory. Now they finally had their chance to put me back in my place. I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, listening to Claire's soft snores through the wall. She slept like a baby, probably dreaming about her new life without the inconvenience of a disabled husband cramping her style. At exactly 8 a.m., a rusted pickup truck rumbled into our driveway. I was in the kitchen, trying to reach the coffee maker from my chair, when Danny and Tommy McGinty walked through my front door without knocking. They were carbon copies of each other, thick necks, beer guts, and the kind of swagger that comes from peaked-in-high-school confidence. "Morning, Jackie boy," Danny said, not bothering to hide his grin. "Ready for your big move?" "Where's Claire?" I asked. "Already left for work," Tommy replied, pulling out a stack of trash bags. "She said to tell you she's real sorry she couldn't be here to say goodbye." Real sorry. Right. They moved through my house like a demolition crew, stuffing my clothes into garbage bags, tossing my books into cardboard boxes, treating my possessions like they were cleaning out a hoarder's attic. When Danny picked up the framed photo of Claire and me on our wedding day, he made a show of looking at it before dropping it into a bag without the protective wrapping. "Careful with that," I said. "What's it matter?" Tommy laughed. "Not like you'll be needing wedding photos anymore." They loaded me into the back of their van like cargo, my wheelchair folded and shoved in beside boxes of my life. The Sunset Motel on Route 9 was exactly what you'd expect from a place that rented rooms by the hour, peeling paint, cracked asphalt, and a neon sign with half the letters burned out. Room 127 smelled like cigarettes and industrial disinfectant. The carpet was the color of old mustard, and the bathroom barely had enough space for my wheelchair to turn around. Danny dropped my bags on the sagging bed, while Tommy leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Claire left you this," Danny said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "Divorce papers and a little note." I opened it with shaking hands. The note was written on Claire's law firm letterhead. "You're on your own, Jackson. Enjoy your new life." She also wanted us to give you some advice, Tommy added, stepping closer. "Stay away from the house. Stay away from Claire. She's moving on, and you should too." "And if I don't?" The brothers exchanged a look that made me freeze. "Let's just say your accident wasn't the worst thing that could happen to you," Danny said softly. "Lots of dangerous intersections around here. Easy for a guy in a wheelchair to get hit by a truck." They left me there, alone in that miserable room with my garbage bags full of memories and a month's rent that felt more like a countdown timer. I sat in the growing darkness, listening to the highway traffic and the occasional shout from other rooms, and made myself a promise. They thought I was broken. They'd never seen me pissed. The Iron Lake Recovery Center was a converted warehouse that smelled like rubber mats and determination. Dr. Lorna Vasquez was a compact woman with forearms like steel cables and the bedside manner of a drill sergeant. "You want to feel sorry for yourself, Reid?" she asked on my first day, watching me struggle with a simple transfer from wheelchair to exercise mat. "Do it on your own time. In here, we work." The other patients called her Dr. Doom, but she was exactly what I needed. Someone who saw past the wheelchair to the man who used to lift 300 pounds and run 5 miles every morning. She pushed me harder than I thought possible, through exercises that left me soaked in sweat and shaking with exhaustion. "Your legs might not work," she said during week 3, spotting me as I pulled my body weight on the parallel bars. "But your arms are getting stronger than they ever were." She was right. My shoulders broadened, my chest filled out, and my hands developed calluses that reminded me of my construction days before Reid's safety gear took off. I wasn't the same man who'd fallen from that rig, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. The gossip mill in Iron Lake ran on diesel and spite, and Mrs. Schroeder, our former neighbor, was its chief engineer. She posted on the town Facebook page about my abandonment, but Claire had gotten there first with her version of events. According to the comments, I was an abusive husband who'd been mooching off my successful lawyer wife, probably cheating on her with my physical therapist. "Dad's such a loser," my 17-year-old daughter Bella posted on TikTok, filming herself in what used to be my home office. "Mom's finally free from his toxic energy. Living our best life now." The video got 12,000 views and 300 comments, most of them calling me everything from a loser to a predator. My own daughter had thrown me under the bus for social media clout. But the real knife in the back came from my company's board of directors. They voted unanimously to remove me as CEO for health reasons, installing my former business partner Vince Morrison as interim chief executive. Vince, who I'd helped start his first company 15 years ago. Vince, who'd been my best man at my wedding to Clare. Vince, who was now living in my house, sleeping in my bed, and running my company. I found this out on a Tuesday evening at Murphy's Bar, a dive that served whiskey in plastic cups and didn't judge a man for drinking alone. Eddie Murphy, no relation to the comedian, was the owner, a former boxer who'd trained me back in my amateur days. He'd been one of the few people to visit me in the hospital. "Jackie, you look like hell warmed over," Eddie said, sliding a beer across the scarred wooden bar. "Thanks for the pep talk, coach." "I'm serious. You been eating? You're skinny as a rail." Before I could answer, the front door opened and in walked Vince Morrison, looking like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine. Expensive suit, perfect hair, and the kind of smile that sold million-dollar contracts. He spotted me immediately and his grin widened. "Jackson, what a surprise seeing you here." The bar went quiet. Everyone knew the story by now, the crippled CEO who'd been dumped by his wife and replaced by his former partner. Vince approached my table with the confidence of a man who'd won the lottery. "How are you adjusting to your new situation?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at my wheelchair. "Just peachy, Vince. Thanks for asking." Good, good. Claire was worried about you. She feels terrible about how things ended. I'm sure she's crying herself to sleep every night." Vince laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Actually, she's sleeping pretty well these days. Amazing what a little stress relief can do for a person." The implication hung in the air like smoke. I felt heat rising in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "You always were good at relieving stress, Vince. Remember that time you relieved the stress of having too much money in the company account?" His smile faltered. He was referring to an incident 5 years ago when Vince had borrowed $50,000 from his own company to cover gambling debts. I'd helped him pay it back and keep it quiet, a favor he'd apparently forgotten. "That's ancient history, Jackson. Water under the bridge." "Right, just like our friendship." I lifted my beer to take a sip, and my hand, still shaky from nerve damage, tilted too far. Beer splashed across the table and onto Vince's Italian leather shoes. "Oops," I said. "Guess I'm still learning to drink like a cripple." As Vince stepped back in disgust, I wheeled forward, rolling directly over his left foot. He yelped and hopped backward, and the entire bar erupted in laughter and applause. "You always wanted to walk in my shoes, Vince," I called, as he limped toward the door. "How's it feel?" Eddie was grinning when he brought me another beer. "That was beautiful, Jackie, but you know he's going to make you pay for that." "Let him try. I've got nothing left to lose." "That's where you're wrong," Eddie said, leaning across the bar. "You don't win by playing their game. You win by making your own rules." That night, I called my assistant Bri Henderson, one of the few people at Reid who'd stayed loyal. She'd been feeding me information about the company's operations, and what she told me made me freeze. "Vince has been transferring funds to shell companies," she whispered over the phone. "He's trying to force a buyout of your shares at 10 cents on the dollar. Says the company's in financial trouble because of your medical expenses." "How much has he moved?" $2.3 million so far, and Jackson, Claire's been signing off on the transfers. Her law firm is handling the paperwork. My wife and my former best friend, working together to steal my company while I rotted in a motel room. They thought I was helpless, that being in a wheelchair had somehow lobotomized me. Time to show them how wrong they were. The next morning, I called Dr. Vasquez and told her I wanted to try walking. She'd been preparing me for this moment for weeks, building up my core strength and working on my balance. The damage to my spine was incomplete. I had feeling in my legs and some muscle control, just not enough to support my weight reliably. "It's going to hurt," she warned, fitting me with leg braces and a walking harness, "and you might fall." "I've been falling for months, Doc. Time to get back up." My first step was agony, like lightning shooting up my spine. My legs shook like saplings in a hurricane, and I had to grip the parallel bars so hard I thought they might bend. But I took that step, and then another, and another. After 20 feet, I collapsed back into my wheelchair, soaked in sweat and shaking with exhaustion. But I'd done it. I'd walked. "Not bad for a cripple," I gasped. Dr. Vasquez was beaming. "Not bad for anyone. We'll get you walking with a cane within a month." That night, alone in my motel room, I stood up from my wheelchair using only the wall for support. My legs trembled and my back screamed, but I stood there for 30 seconds, looking at myself in the cracked mirror. "Let the games begin," I said to my reflection. Bri Henderson was a godsend. 26 years old, computer science degree from MIT, and a grudge against Vince Morrison that ran almost as deep as mine. He'd passed her over for a promotion 3 times, always giving the job to less qualified men who happened to golf with him on weekends. "I've been documenting everything," she told me during our clandestine meeting at a coffee shop across town. "Financial transfers, email communications, meeting records. Vince has been sloppy." She slid a flash drive across the table. Security footage from the executive conference room, Vince and Clare having their little strategy sessions after hours. I plugged the drive into my laptop and watched my wife and former best friend plotting my destruction. They were sitting close together, Clare's hand resting on Vince's thigh as they reviewed financial documents. The timestamp showed this was from 3 weeks after my accident, while I was still in intensive care. "There's more," Bri said. "Vince has been cooking the books to make the company look unprofitable. He's planning to buy your shares through a shell company, then magically discover the accounting errors that restore profitability. How much is my stake worth? At current market value? 15 million? He's offering you 1.5. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my wheelchair. "What else do you have?" "Hotel receipts. Vince has been charging romantic getaways with Clare to the company expense account, and..." She paused, grinning. "He's not just sleeping with your wife." She showed me photos from her phone. Vince entering a downtown apartment building, arm in arm with Naomi Fletcher, Clare's best friend and maid of honor at our wedding. The same Naomi who'd been consoling Clare through our difficult divorce and posting supportive messages on social media about strong women leaving toxic relationships. How long has this been going on? Based on the hotel records, at least 6 months before your accident. Naomi's been playing both sides, feeding information to Vince while pretending to support Clare. This was better than I'd hoped. Not only were they stealing from me, they were betraying each other. Time to light the fuse and watch the fireworks. Mrs. Schroeder, our former neighbor, was the town's unofficial information broker. She knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. I called her from a burner phone, disguising my voice as a concerned citizen who'd witnessed something disturbing. "I saw Vince Morrison with some woman who wasn't Clare Reid," I told her. "They were all over each other at the Marriott downtown. Isn't he supposed to be helping her through her divorce?" Within hours, the Iron Lake Facebook page was buzzing with speculation. Someone had seen Vince with a mystery woman. Someone else had spotted him at Naomi Fletcher's apartment. By evening, the rumor mill was in full swing. But I wasn't done. The next morning, I put on my best suit, the one Clare had packed in those garbage bags, and had Eddie drive me to Reid Safety Gear headquarters. It was time to crash my own company's board meeting. Security tried to stop me at the elevator, but I had Bri's keycard and the legal authority of a founding shareholder. When I rolled into the conference room, the shocked silence was worth every humiliating moment of the past 3 months. "Gentlemen," I said, positioning myself at the head of the table, "I hope you don't mind if I sit in on this meeting about my company." Vince had gone pale, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume. The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. They'd voted me out, but they all knew who'd built this company from nothing. "Jackson," Vince stammered, "we weren't expecting you." "I bet you weren't. Please don't let me interrupt. I believe you were discussing the sale of my shares." I opened my laptop and connected it to the conference room's projection system. The security footage filled the wall-mounted screen, Vince and Clare in their intimate planning session, her hand on his leg, as they discussed stealing my life's work. "I thought the board should see how dedicated our interim CEO has been to the company's interests," I said. "Working so closely with my wife's legal team, such commitment to detail." The room erupted in whispers. Board members were checking their phones, probably seeing the rumors about Vince's affair that were now spreading across social media. I clicked to the next slide, financial records showing the shell company transfers. "And here's the fascinating part," I continued. "Our interim CEO has discovered a way to make $2.3 million disappear from our accounts. Quite a magic trick." Vince stood up, his face red with anger. "This is a private board meeting. You have no right to—" "I have every right. I own 40% of this company, which is more than you, Vince. And unlike you, I've never stolen from it." I clicked to the final slide, photos of Vince entering Naomi's apartment building, time-stamped from the previous week. "Oh, and gentlemen, Meet the other woman in our interim CEO's life. Naomi Fletcher, who coincidentally is my wife's best friend and legal advisor. Quite the tangled web we've woven. The board voted unanimously to suspend Vince pending a full investigation. They also voted to restore my access to company accounts and facilities. As the meeting broke up, Vince cornered me by the elevator. "You think you've won?" he snarled. "You're still a cripple in a wheelchair. Claire's still leaving you. Nothing changes that." I smiled and pressed the elevator call button. "You're right, Vince. I am in a wheelchair. But you know what? I can still reach your car." That afternoon, Vince discovered that his pristine 1967 Mustang convertible, his pride and joy, worth more than most people's houses, had been filled with fish guts and paint stripper. The leather seats were ruined, the paint was bubbling, and the smell would never come out. Security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned during the incident. When he confronted me in the parking lot, screaming about vandalism and lawsuits, I was ready for him. "Prove it," I said calmly. "But while you're at it, maybe explain to the police how you've been embezzling from my company and sleeping with both my wife and her best friend." He took a swing at me, which was a mistake. 6 months of physical therapy had given me reflexes like a cat and upper body strength that could crush walnuts. I caught his fist, twisted his wrist, and used his momentum to send him sprawling into a puddle of motor oil. "You always wanted to walk in my shoes, Vince," I called as he struggled to his feet, his expensive suit ruined. "Now you slip in my oil." That evening, I received an anonymous text message. "You think you've won? You haven't even started bleeding yet. Game on." The text message bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Clare and Vince were sloppy, emotional players who made mistakes when they were angry. But someone else was pulling strings behind the scenes, someone smart enough to stay hidden while others did the dirty work. I was walking short distances with a cane now, my legs getting stronger every day. Dr. Vasquez had cleared me for limited mobility, which was medical speak for, "Don't try to run a marathon, but you're not helpless anymore." The psychological impact was enormous. People treated you differently when you could look them in the eye instead of looking up from a wheelchair. Bri had been digging deeper into the financial records, following money trails and email threads. What she found made me freeze. "The shell company transfers didn't start after your accident," she told me over coffee. "They go back 18 months. Someone's been planning this for a long time." "Vince?" That's what I thought, but look at this. She showed me a series of emails between Vince and an account registered to N. Fletcher Consulting. "Naomi's been feeding him information about Claire's legal strategies and your personal finances. She knew about your safety inspection schedule, your insurance policies, even your medical records." The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. She knew I'd be at the plant that day. Gets worse. Naomi Fletcher used to work for Reid Safety Gear. You fired her 7 years ago for embezzling from the employee pension fund. She's been planning this revenge ever since. I remembered Naomi Fletcher now, a sharp-eyed accountant who'd been skimming money from worker retirement accounts to fund her gambling habit. I'd not only fired her, I'd made sure she could never work in accounting again. She'd sworn she'd make me pay for ruining her life. Apparently, she'd kept her word. She manipulated Clare into the affair with Vince, I said, pieces falling into place. Probably convinced her I was cheating, that I didn't appreciate her. And she's been playing Vince too. Those hotel receipts? She's been meeting with other men there, using company funds to finance her lifestyle. Vince thinks he's her only lover. This changed everything. Clare and Vince were just pawns in Naomi's revenge scheme. She'd orchestrated my downfall, my marriage's destruction, and the theft of my company, all while positioning herself to profit from the chaos. Time to turn the tables. I leaked the full story to Channel 7 News. The affair, the embezzlement, the manipulation, everything. Sarah Martinez, the investigative reporter, had been looking for a story about corporate corruption. I handed her a scandal that would run for weeks. "This is incredible," she said, reviewing the evidence in her downtown office. "You've got financial fraud, adultery, conspiracy, and a revenge plot that spans 7 years. When can we air this? Tonight. But I want to control the timing. I also bought back controlling interest in Reid safety gear through my own shell company, using funds I'd hidden in offshore accounts that Naomi didn't know about. The board was happy to sell. The scandal had tanked the stock price, and they wanted to distance themselves from the mess. By Friday evening, I owned 51% of my company again. Now for the final act. I sent identical text messages to Claire, Vince, Naomi, and the McGinty brothers. Settlement meeting tonight, 9 p.m., Lakeside Cabin on Deer Point Road. Come alone or lose everything. The cabin belonged to my family, a rustic retreat on the isolated north shore of Iron Lake. No neighbors, no cell phone coverage, and only one road in or out. Perfect for a private conversation. I arrived early, setting up cameras in every room and a live stream connection to the town's Facebook page. Whatever happened tonight, the whole town would witness it. They came separately, but arrived within minutes of each other, like actors taking their marks for the final scene. Claire looked haggard, her perfect makeup unable to hide the stress lines around her eyes. Vince had traded his designer suits for jeans and a hoodie, trying to look casual but fooling no one. Naomi wore all black, appropriate for a funeral. The McGinty brothers brought baseball bats. Cozy little reunion, I said from my position near the fireplace, leaning on my cane. Thanks for coming. Cut the crap, Jackson, Claire snapped. What do you want? Justice, accountability, maybe a little public humiliation. I pressed a button on my phone, and the wall-mounted TV came to life, showing the live stream counter, 1,247 viewers, and climbing. The chat was already exploding with comments as people recognized the participants. Smile, everyone. You're live on Iron Lake Community TV. Vince lunged for the camera, but I was ready. My cane caught him across the shins, sending him sprawling. 6 months of physical therapy had taught me that mobility wasn't just about walking. It was about balance, leverage, and using your opponent's momentum against them. Now, Vince. Let's not disappoint our audience. Claire was staring at the viewer counter in horror. Turn it off, Jackson, please. Not until everyone hears the truth. All of it. I played the audio recordings. Claire and Vince planning my removal from the company, Naomi coaching them on legal strategies, the McGinty brothers discussing ways to permanently solve the Jackson problem. The chat exploded with shocked reactions and angry emojis. You manipulated my wife, I said to Naomi. Convinced her I was the enemy while you stole from both of us. You ruined my life, Naomi screamed. You destroyed my career, my reputation, everything. You stole from workers' pension funds. I stopped a thief. And I stopped you. Danny McGinty stepped forward, tapping his bat against his palm. Enough talking. Time to finish this. Touch me, and you'll do it in front of 3,000 witnesses, I said, nodding at the viewer counter. But Danny was past caring about witnesses. He raised the bat, and I triggered the cabin's security system. Every car alarm in the parking area went off simultaneously, a cacophony of horns and sirens that could be heard for miles. In the chaos that followed, I activated the cabin's lockdown system. Steel shutters slamming down over the windows, doors automatically locking from the inside. My family had installed it years ago after a break-in, never imagining it would be used to trap my own wife and her conspirators. Let us out! Claire pounded on the front door as rain began hammering the roof. Not until we finish our conversation. The storm I'd been tracking all day had finally arrived, turning the dirt road into a muddy river. Even if they got outside, their cars weren't going anywhere. I'd also removed the spark plug wires while they were arguing, a precaution learned from my construction days. For the next hour, I laid out their crimes in detail for our growing online audience. The financial fraud, the manipulation, the conspiracy to steal my company and destroy my life. Vince broke down and confessed everything, begging the viewers for forgiveness. Claire alternated between rage and tears, blaming everyone but herself. But it was Naomi who provided the most entertainment, ranting about her 7-year plan for revenge, how she'd manipulated everyone like chess pieces, how satisfying it had been to watch me fall from that safety rig. "You planned my accident?" I asked. "I knew you'd inspect that rig personally. You always did. One loose bolt, one frayed cable. Accidents happen in construction." The chat went silent. Even my enemies were horrified by the admission of attempted murder. "Say that again for the camera, Naomi." She realized her mistake too late. In her rage, she'd confessed to sabotage and attempted murder in front of 5,000 witnesses. The police were probably already on their way. As if summoned by my thoughts, I heard sirens approaching through the storm. I deactivated the lockdown system and opened the front door as squad cars splashed through the muddy parking area, their red and blue lights painting the cabin walls. "Officers," I called. "Perfect timing. I believe you'll want to arrest these people for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder." Claire fell to her knees in the mud, mascara running down her cheeks like black tears. "Jackson, please. I'm sorry. I never wanted this." I looked down at her. This woman I'd loved for 15 years, who'd thrown me away like garbage when I needed her most. "You said I was a burden, Claire. Watch how heavy I can get." 3 months later, I stood on the stage of the Iron Lake Convention Center, looking out at an audience of employees, investors, reporters, and curious townspeople who'd followed my story from the beginning. The annual Reid Safety Gear shareholders meeting had never drawn this kind of crowd, but then again, we'd never had this kind of drama. My legs were steady now, requiring only a walking stick for balance. Dr. Vasquez sat in the front row, beaming with pride at her star patient. Bri Henderson sat beside her, now promoted to chief financial officer with a salary that reflected her loyalty and competence. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium, "thank you for joining us for what I promise will be the most interesting shareholders meeting in Reid Safety Gear's history." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew what was coming. The local news had been covering the trials and investigations for weeks. Clare had been disbarred and sentenced to 3 years for conspiracy and fraud. Vince got 5 years for embezzlement and corporate theft. The McGinty brothers were serving 18 months for assault and conspiracy. But Naomi Fletcher was the real prize. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and a dozen other charges had earned her 15 years in federal prison. The judge had been particularly harsh after viewing the live stream footage of her confession. "When I started this company 20 years ago," I continued, "I believed that safety wasn't just about equipment, it was about trust. Trust between workers and management, trust between partners, trust between family members." I clicked a remote, and the wall screens lit up with photos from the cabin confrontation. Claire on her knees in the mud, Vince cowering behind a chair, Naomi in handcuffs as federal agents led her away. Some of you may have seen these images before. They represent the consequences of betraying that trust. But today isn't about revenge, it's about redemption. The audience was riveted. Even the reporters had stopped taking notes to listen. Reid Safety Gear has not only survived this crisis, we've emerged stronger. Our stock price has tripled since the scandal broke, because investors value companies with integrity. Our safety equipment sales have increased 40%, because workers trust a CEO who's actually been injured on the job. Applause filled the auditorium. In the back, I spotted Eddie Murphy giving me a thumbs up. But the real victory isn't financial, it's personal. 6 months ago, I was a broken man in a wheelchair, abandoned by my wife, betrayed by my friends, left to rot in a motel room. Today, I'm standing before you as proof that no one can keep you down unless you let them. I paused, letting that sink in. My ex-wife called me a burden. My former business partner said I was finished. My daughter posted videos calling me a loser. They were all wrong, but not for the reasons you might think. Another click of the remote brought up a video message from Bella, recorded just that morning. She was crying, her perfect makeup ruined by tears. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I was angry and stupid, and I believed Mom's lies about you. I know you probably hate me, but I love you, and I'm proud of you, and I hope someday you can forgive me." The audience was silent now, hanging on every word. "I don't hate my daughter," I said. "She's 17 years old and she made a mistake. But forgiveness has to be earned, not given. She'll have to prove she's learned from this experience." I walked to the edge of the stage, close enough to see individual faces in the crowd. As for the others, Clare, Vince, Naomi, the McGinty brothers, they're exactly where they belong. Prison is the perfect place for people who think they can steal, lie, and cheat their way to success. The applause was thunderous now. People were standing, cheering, some wiping away tears. But I want to end with a message for anyone who's ever been written off, thrown away, or told they're finished. The only person who can decide your worth is you. The only person who can keep you down is you. And the only person who can lift you back up is you. I raised my walking stick in the air like a trophy. They called me a burden. Guess I was one they could never carry. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Reporters rushed the stage, photographers snapped pictures, and the live stream chat exploded with congratulations and support. I'd gone from discarded husband to corporate hero, from wheelchair-bound victim to standing symbol of resilience. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and the last reporters filed their stories, I stood alone on the convention center balcony, looking out over Iron Lake. The same view I'd seen from my wheelchair in that miserable motel room, but everything had changed. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your victory. You've earned it. A friend." I smiled and deleted the message. There would always be enemies, always be people who wanted to see me fail. But I'd learned something important over the past year. The best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. And I was definitely better. Clare was in prison, her legal career destroyed, her reputation in ruins. Vince had lost everything, his company, his freedom, his dignity. Naomi's elaborate revenge plot had backfired spectacularly, landing her in federal prison for the next decade and a half. The McGinty brothers were learning that intimidation tactics don't work in prison the way they do on the outside. Meanwhile, I was standing on my own 2 feet, running a more successful company than ever, and planning a future that didn't include any of them. My phone rang. "Dr. Vasquez. Jackson, I just watched your speech online. I'm proud of you." "Thanks, Doc. Couldn't have done it without you." "Actually, you could have. That's what makes it so impressive." She was right. The physical therapy, the walking, the strength training, those were just tools. The real work had been mental, emotional, spiritual. Learning to see myself as something other than a victim. Choosing to fight back instead of giving up. Deciding that my worth wasn't determined by other people's actions. "What's next?" she asked. I looked out over the lake, where moonlight painted silver paths across the dark water. Now I live my life,